Welcome back. News and Talk 1380 WAOK, the voice of the community, with people passionate in politics on your Sunday afternoon. Before the break, we were talking about the Hunter Biden situation and what this means for Hunter going forward, which I said will probably be a plea deal at some point in time to the misdemeanor charges, being that he has paid back the $1.4 billion that he owes to the government. And normally tax cases end in a plea deal, probably about 95% of them end in a plea deal without going to trial. However, going into the 2024 election cycle, we talked about the calls for President Biden to step aside. I made the case that what we consider to be President Biden's weaknesses in this election are actually his strengths, and that is why he is the best candidate right now on the Democratic side of the aisle to compete against Republicans. Because what we have seen is, as we are going through this generational shift, as we're going through this millennial malaise, this is the type of social shift that we see in America usually every 30 or 40 years. If you think about the flower children of the 1960s kind of being a response to the social conservatism coming out of the 40s and 50s and the greatest generation era. If you look at the Reagan Revolution coming as a response to the kind of looseness of the free love 60s and 70s, moving us back towards conservatism. If you look at the militarism that really spotlighted and highlighted the earlier part of the 21st century, now we're moving into this millennial malaise where people have lost all reverence for or all interest in the systems that exist. No one believes the school is the key to success in the future. I talked to my niece. She says, well, Jay-Z didn't go to college. Bill Gates dropped out of college, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's what these young people believe. And it's difficult when the millennial generation is the one that played by all those rules, and the only thing they got out of it was depression, debt, and a drinking problem. You have a generation that does not believe in law enforcement or the police anymore. They grew up watching Trayvon Martin be killed in the law enforcement system and the courts not come through to protect him, and they continue that all the way through George Floyd. So they don't really have any respect for police and law enforcement or the powers that be. They don't have any respect for government. They've seen what happens where every single election they claim is stolen, where if you don't like what happened at the end of the election, you storm the Capitol, where there's always questions about who is actually in charge and whether or not any of this matters. They don't trust the media. Media is now a pick-your-own-adventure situation. If you want to hear nothing but conservative talking points 24 hours a day from every voice, you can live in that silo and never have to hear anything outside of it. If you want to hear nothing but liberal voices 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you can hear exactly that and then live in that silo. If you want to hear no news at all and only hear sports, entertainment, and weather, you can do exactly that and never have any idea what is going on in the political situation in the United States of America or anywhere in the globe. If you only want to hear foreign media, you can do exactly that whenever you feel like it. So the point is, there is no objective truth anymore. There is no Walter Cronkite coming to this generation saying, and that's just how it is. And because of that, you have people who are really just walking through the wilderness, walking through the desert. And we have to have a stabilizing force in American politics that will keep this boat from flipping over. Now, we've seen what has happened with the rise of the far right on the Republican side of the aisle, where you don't have that stabilizing force in place. Now they can't keep a speaker in the House in the Republican caucus because every single faction of Republicanism, as Mitt Romney once called it, the three stools of the Republican Party: national security conservatives, economic conservatives, and social conservatives, now they have just splintered apart. So when you can have 8 members of the MAGA caucus, of the Freedom Caucus, dethrone the Speaker of the House, when it takes 15 rounds of voting to get the Speaker confirmed in the first place, and then after you depose him, you have to go through a half dozen people just to get to another one who has absolutely no power, there is no rudder steering the boat on the Republican side of the aisle. This is why, even though you have a perfect situation where you can get immigration reform done, border security done this week, the president came out and gave a speech and said, I am ready to deal. If you guys give us the foreign policy funding we have, we will give you whatever you want on the southern border. And they could not come to the table with an agreement. This is why when you're looking at many of the situations going into the 2024 election cycle, we had another Republican debate this week, a pointless and meaningless Republican debate with all the losing candidates who are going to lose, getting up there trying to offer themselves as being the alternative for Trump because in case he goes to prison, they want to be the nominee. None of them have the gravitas. None of them have the institutional seriousness. None of them have the stature to actually command the respect of that room and to command the respect to that stage. And that's why you can have someone like a Vivek Ramaswamy come in as just a social media bomb thrower. They basically invited the comment section of a YouTube video to be a presidential candidate, and all he does is throw bombs, throw grenades, make jokes, insult people, and the party does not move forward. This is what happens when you don't have a rudder. You don't have an anchor. You don't have something to moor the party within reality. The party cannibalizes itself. And even despite Joe Biden's low poll numbers, he is still more popular. It will still beat any of the Republicans in that field. And there's not another Democrat that you could simply slot in there that will be able to unite the seven kingdoms the same way that Joe Biden was able to in 2020. Because remember, elections are about choices. You are running against the alternative, not against the almighty. And who is the most likely to be able to bring those people together? It is the incumbent. Because if you throw out the incumbent, you throw out all the powers of incumbency. You throw out the name recognition, like it or not. Most campaigns are about introducing your candidate to the people and helping to build their name recognition so they know who that is. When you have an incumbent, you already have that. When you're talking about fundraising, putting together the fundraising structure that will take to run a 50-state campaign that will be well into the $2 and $3 billion range. Who's just going to step in and do that out of nowhere and be able to mount a credible challenge to the Republican side of the aisle? Who's going to have the type of coattails needed to make sure that not just do you win the presidential election, but that you win back majorities in the Senate and the House of Representatives? We saw the Biden coattails. The Biden coattails brought us Ossoff and Warnock. It brought us John Fetterman. It brought us many of these senators that helped the Democrats keep control of the Senate and even to not bat the red wave so that right now the Republican majority is down to 2 votes. You throw that away by throwing away the powers of incumbency. And also, President Biden has a unique stature within American politics where he's able to talk to those centrist, white, middle-class voters, the ones who are turned off by Trumpism, but the ones who are also afraid of socialism and Marxism and too many minorities. The things that we think make President Biden weak are actually his strengths in this race going forward. Because when you're talking about trying to bring over those middle-of-the-road voters who are not quite full-blown MAGA yet, but who are still maybe a little bit on the centrist to conservative side of the aisle and aren't ready for the groundswell of changes that someone like a Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren might bring. Well, when you're tempering that, you need someone, a moderating force, like good old granddad Joe Biden. So before we start talking about, well, let's throw out Joe Biden, he needs to step aside, who exactly are you going to slide into that position who can do all those things? Who are you going to pick up out of the blue who can run a 50-state campaign, who has the name recognition, who has the fundraising ability, who has the legislative record, and who can appeal to those middle-of-the-road voters while also doing the work necessary to motivate the base? Now, is there work to do? Absolutely. But all that would happen if you just slid Joe Biden out the door is you will grease the skids for MAGA 2.0. And President Trump has already told us what MAGA 2.0 will be. I don't think any of us want to be in that America. So as much as, you may listen to someone like the Breakfast Club or, Bill Maher or some of these other people, you have to think to yourself, what are the practical politics of this situation and what gives you the best chance of winning? Not what makes you feel the best, but what helps you win the best and what gets you the best policies out of the solutions. And also, now that the Democrats are in a position where they really need to appeal to black voters again, this would be the perfect time to make those demands for reparations very clear and concise. You're going to need us in 2024. And this ain't the time to be talking about what you can and can't do. This is the time to make it plain that we are expecting a vote on reparations in this next term. want to hear what you guys have to say about this. We'll be back after the break. News and Talk 1380 WAOK.